And I'm going to get to John Pienaar to spell us the latest political situation as he sees it. First of all, perhaps I'm honour bound really to ask all four of you for a brief thought about Hillsborough. I'll begin with you, John Pugh, if I may. I know you're here to talk education, but inevitably you'll have been affected like the rest of us by what you saw yesterday.
Well, I'm a Merseyside MP and I'm a Liverpool supporter, and like most people in Merseyside, I think we're hoping this is almost the last chapter in an unbearably sad story. But what it does tell you is that even when justice appears, it doesn't eradicate loss and bereavement, and that will persist.
Yeah. Let me turn to Nick Dakin then. What would you say?
Well, I think it's a good step forward for justice for the 96, but it's taken 27 years to get to this point, and really that's something for us all to reflect on, and you know, there are issues of accountability that still need to be answered.
There's quite a lot. There's got a long way for this one to run, isn't there? Jonathan Arnott?
I was 8 years old at the time when this happened, and growing up as a football fan, you know, it was something that really overshadowed the game throughout that time. And
it was a very different time for football fans in those days.
Indeed it was, and I suppose really the shock is that for something that was such a big part of football at that time to see that it's taken 27 years for the wheels to slowly turn that recognition, you just have to. Your heart goes out to the families, really.
Yeah, I think I can talk to Nick Gibb, who's able to join us in a radio car. Hello, Nick. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about the academies, which I know is the point of your attendance really here today. But we're going to begin with a very brief comment about events at Hillsborough and yesterday's conclusion. So, have you got any observations on what happened? It's a sad story in a way, isn't it?
It's a very sad story, and it's a great pity that it's taken so many years to get to this point where the facts and the truth of what happened on that tragic day have come to light, and we've reached a firm conclusion.
Right. OK, thanks for that. Let's turn to academies. John Pienaar, Chief Political Correspondent. I thought we were sort of all heading towards everyone having academies in England and Wales, but perhaps we're not. What's your understanding?
Well, whatever you think of the government with this, for a Conservative government with a really quite small majority, no one could accuse them of lacking ambition for change. And this academy plan is just the latest example of where the government's eyes may turn out to be bigger than its stomach, where they may have bitten off more than they can actually get down. The plan as it was, and still is as we sit here, is to get all schools into academy status by 2022, so 2 years beyond the next election. But no sooner did we hear about that plan than the rebellion started on the Conservative side. We know about doubts elsewhere, and you'll be talking about those. But on the Conservative side, a good many Conservative councils, Conservative councillors, think this is just pushing where you do not need to push. If it's not broken, why mend it? That's essentially their argument. And along with that is the idea that it's just not a Conservative thing to do. Crucially, there are maybe 40 or so Conservative MPs in the House of Commons who agree with all of that. And it takes many fewer than that to stop a government plan dead. So they have to change. They will have to change, and changes have already been set out. So the idea is that some of those councils could, in future now, become those who run academies, not in the old local education authority and school relationship, but actually acting the way a business or a charity would and taking over the academies. There's another possibility that those schools could be, by the councils, be required to take on more kids with particular needs and meet a particular need there, or maybe take more kids in where there's a particular need in an area. But the deadline is still there, and there'll need to be movement on that, I think. I clearly pick up before a lot of those Tories are going to back down. OK, Mr Gibb, I hope there are probably bits of that you disagree with, but what do you say the present situation is?
Well, we published a white paper that sets out a very clear vision that we want all schools to become academies by 2022, which is in 6 years' time. This is providing a long-term plan for what we see as the future of education. Don't forget, already 65% of all secondary schools have academy status, 20% of all primary schools. And what is this about? This is about having in place policies to raise standards of behaviour in our schools, to improve academic performance, to improve children's ability to read properly and to perform maths properly. And already 1.4 million more pupils today are in good and outstanding schools compared to 2010.
There are plenty of people who dispute all that, but I mean, I wanted to know really from you where we are at the moment. Have you changed the government's policy on this or not? What are you offering those rebels in the Commons?
Well, we're talking to MPs in the House of Commons, we're talking to local authorities and councillors, and we're talking to the teaching profession about this matter. We have to have, as a government, a long-term plan for what we do when, in 5 years' time, there are lots of local authorities, like today, Bromley or Bournemouth, where more than 80% of all their schools, including primary schools, have already converted into academy status. And there'll be more of those authorities as we get to 2020 and 2022. So we just have to have a long-term plan about what we do at that point when those local authorities are not viable in terms of providing school improvement services. And that's what this is about. This is all about school improvement. We want every local school.
Yeah, I know, but
we
don't know how you're going to do it
yet.
yet. You seem to be. I mean, I haven't. Can I ask you one more time? What changes have you made to? What changes are you contemplating to that original agenda?
Well, we're not. The vision is very clear.
I know the vision is, but how you get there, maybe then you're changing.
Well, the vision is we want to have all schools to be academies by 2022. This was mentioned by the Prime Minister in the speech the end of last September 2015. The manifesto says we want to continue with the academisation programme, and we want a clear way of raising academic standards. The thing about academies is that when schools are underperforming, we can take very swift action to tackle that underperformance. Whereas you've seen in local authorities examples of schools languishing in special measures year after year after year. We can't have that. We have to have good local schools in every single part of the country, whether it's a coastal community, a rural community, or parts of our inner cities. And that's what this policy is all about, making sure that parents can trust their local school to be providing their children with a very high quality education.
Nick, good morning, it's John Pienaar here.
Good morning.
From what I've heard so far, you haven't done enough. I mean, you've offered these concessions, which are not insignificant, and we mentioned them a moment ago. But when you talk to your colleagues on the Conservative benches, I had Graham Brady, the chairman of the 22 committee, no less, in my studio on Sunday, and he said, well, he seemed to be happy. It wasn't entirely clear to me why. And I wonder if the deadline, the 2022 deadline for all schools to become academies may turn out to be just a bit flexible.
Well, all I can say, John, is that we have set out in the white paper the plan for all schools to become academies by 2022. There's no change to that vision.
Yeah, but does that plan become an aspiration?
No, it's not an aspiration. The plan is for all schools to become academies by 2022 because, as I said, there are going to be lots of local authorities that are simply not sustainable in the long run.
Then you're going to have a rebellion, Nick, aren't you? You're going to have a rebellion and you're going to lose.
Well, debate is all about discussion, about persuasion, about talking about these issues, and that's what we're doing with the profession, with local authorities, and that's happening right now.
I'll just try one more time on this, Nick.
Yep.
I mean, you're still changing things. Then you're still trying to meet those reservations of your colleagues by being prepared to change. You're still in the mood for that.
Well, we're talking to them, and we want schools to have the maximum flexibility and the maximum amount of choice in terms of when and how they become an academy between now and 2022. Those 35% of secondary schools that have not yet become academies, we want to make sure they do have maximum choice. And it's those kinds of issues that we're talking about with local authorities and with colleagues. But the vision, the long-term vision, 6-year vision of what happens by 2022 is clear, and we have to get to that point.
OK, the vision's intact, and how you get there perhaps we still have to debate. Let's talk then about the vision thing with our three guests here in the studio. Nick Dakin, first of all, Shadow Schools Minister. Academies, says the Minister, work.
Well, we've heard Nick Gibbs say he's talking to a lot of people. I think it's time to start listening, really, and listening to what the Education Select Committee said, that there's no evidence that academies perform better ipso facto than any other sort of school. So why spend all this energy making good or outstanding schools academies? That distracts attention from what parents and school leaders want, and is really not the right way to do it. I mean, we still haven't had an answer to the question, why are you doing this? And I think people deserve an answer to that question.
Well, he'll say because it makes things better. I don't want to go back to him immediately.
But he hasn't said how it'll make things better, because there is no
standards. That's the trouble.
Let's take
these political arguments. Come in and say it doesn't work.
Let's take what Sir Michael Wilshaw did only a month ago, when he wrote to the Secretary of State about 7 of the largest multi-academy trusts and said these are letting kids down. What are you going to do about it? That in itself is evidence from somebody who knows what they're talking about that academies ipso facto aren't better than other schools. So why waste £1.3 billion pounds that could be better spent on the front line of education in changing schools from one thing to another when they're already good or outstanding.
So Nick Dakin says they just don't work. John Pugh, what do the Liberal Democrats say?
Well, I'm a charitable person, but I'm struggling to state government education policy with any degree of coherence or see any rigour in it whatsoever. Nick's mentioned a long-term plan. Nick and I both served on a bill recently which was addressing the issue of coasting schools. That was, only a year ago. Now we're talking about getting rid of all schools. Work has been done on the national curriculum, but now we're talking about academies being given flexibility in and around that. It is not a long-term plan. We have a Prime Minister who said something rather foolish that now in some perverse way needs to be delivered, and nobody can explain or rationally state why it needs to be done or how it's going to be done. And that's the difficulty which is dawning upon Conservative members as they get more and more into this process.
Jonathan Arnott from UKIP.
First of all, I'd say this shouldn't be about political dogma. This should be about what is best for the education
You're a teacher,
of our
you?
children. Yes, I was a maths teacher.
We need
before
maths teacher. You better get back to teaching maths.
Well,
Sorry, it's only a joke.
I'm all for the idea of choice, but I think what the minister said was effective, that he wants schools to have choice, and he's going to enforce that choice on every school by
Absolutely.
2022. Now, academies, they can work, and I think when schools convert to an academy from a position of strength, when they're already outstanding schools and they move across with that ethos and with that positivity, I think it can work. But when you try to extend that and say it has to happen for all schools, often converting schools from a position of weakness is not the best way to improve those schools. And the Education Select Committee said, and I quote, "Academisation is not always successful, nor is it the only proven alternative for a struggling school. The government should stop exaggerating the success of academies." So there is a time and a place for academies, there is a time and a place for choice, but when you try to enforce it on all of them, actually you're missing the point, because the problem is that there are some problems within the existing academy structure, as the Sutton Trust, for example, that their report has shown. So there are problems. I'd say you fix the problems that you've already got. You don't force all schools to become academies.
Well, Nick, would you like to come back to all that? Quite a range of criticisms there for you.
Yes, but what happens with the academy programme is you take an underperforming school and you bring in a strong sponsor, which is either an outstanding school nearby or an established sponsor like ARC or the Harris Federation. And what they do is they improve those schools. So today there are 350,000 pupils in what are called sponsored academies that previously those schools were underperforming. So there are 350,000 pupils today in much better schools as a consequence of the Academies programme. Take primary schools, those underperforming primary schools that have been converted into academies, that have been, over the last 2 years, they are improving their grades by 10 percentage points more than they did before they became an
right?
academy.
I mean, I'm trying to get some facts here.
Yes.
Do we all accept that around the table or not?
Any school that's underperforming that comes under new management shows significant improvement. But Nick has said the academy process is all about taking underperforming schools and doing something with them. If that is the case, why is he proposing to take outstanding primary schools being run well and dislocating their entire arrangements and turn them into academies when clearly neither the teachers, the local authority, the community, nor the parents wish them to do that?
Nick.
I'll tell you why. Because we need
has to be a different reason.
We need outstanding schools to help us deal with the underperforming schools. So what happens is outstanding schools, instead of being an island unto themselves, just providing a high-quality education to their pupils, we want to take that expertise and that success and spread it to other schools.
But this already
locality.
happens, Nick,
Exactly.
in the local authority context.
I mean, it's a failure to understand what's happening in schools around the country
Hang on,
at the moment.
There are too many schools. No.
This is John Pugh and Nick Dakin cross-examining Nick Gibb, the education minister, at the moment, just in case you've lost track. But on you go, Nick. I'm enjoying it. I just wanted to identify people.
Even in high-performing authorities, there are at least a quarter of their secondary schools that aren't performing well enough. So we need to use the outstanding schools to help improve those schools. And the best way to do that is through an institutional arrangement, through a multi-academy trust, where they're part of the same organisation, and they can then spread that practice, spread the curriculum to improving those schools. Because the goal, the vision, is to have every local school a good school where parents don't need to worry about the quality of the local school. They know it's going to be a good school. That's what we want to achieve from this programme.
Yeah, I should come back to the teacher involved here, Jonathan Arnott, who was kind of waving his finger at me there. Did you want to get it? You just been
I think what we're hearing here is we're hearing the shave being sold, not the razor. We're hearing that we want to have a vision of improving schools, but what we're not hearing actually is evidence that the academy approach improves those failing schools any quicker than under other approaches. And I come back to that Sutton Trust report.
So the point you're making is
states,
that if you get hold of a failing school and you take action, whether you do it academy or any other way, you can improve.
Yes, there's going to be an improvement, and there's sort of a regression to the mean effect, as it were.
You're talking like a mathematics teacher there. Regression to the mean effect.
Indeed. And that Sutton Trust report says, far from providing a solution to disadvantage, a few changes may be exacerbating it. So what I say is that we should be looking at where things aren't currently working in the academy process, doing something about that first, and only then looking at...
OK. Nick Gibb, come back on that.
Well, what's happened is we take much swifter action. When that Ofsted report that's been referred to looked at the weaker chains, the 7-weeker chains, and don't forget there are 650 multi-academy trusts led by schools up and down the country, but these some of the weaker large ones, what we do is we take action. We have removed 120 schools from weaker academy chains and put them with new sponsors. Now there are far more weak schools run by local authorities where they're not taking action or haven't taken action swiftly enough. And what this programme does, we have 8 regional schools commissioners. They're monitoring these academies. Where they underperform, we take action extremely swiftly, and that's the difference between this approach and the local authority approach we've had over the last X decades.
So, I mean, Nick, whatever reservation, whatever changes you may have to make to get this through the comment, you remain evangelically still, you're a believer, you're a believer in academies. This is the answer. That's what you're saying to us.
Yes, because what it does, it gives the professionals, the head teachers, the autonomy to run their school as they see fit, like in any other profession. And they respond to that by not only dealing with underperforming. They respond to that by not only improving underperforming schools, but they also improve those schools that are successful already. So if you take those schools that have voluntarily become academies because they want that autonomy, they are performing 7 percentage points higher than the national average, and that's what you get with giving professionals.
Nick Dakin, you wanted to...
Yeah, I mean, nobody's objecting to academies for schools that are underperforming, and indeed that has had some level of success. Where there's a concern is where head teachers who are running good and outstanding schools are saying to me, why am I being forced? Why is the choice of how I take my school forward with my school community...
you are supposed to be about choice, Nick.
Why is that choice being taken away? And I think it's a contradiction to say that we're giving you choice by taking away choice. That's just a total nonsense.
No, we're giving the professionals autonomy in running their schools, but
they've already got that autonomy. If you listen to what they're saying...
We expect outstanding schools, good schools, to do their part for the rest of the community, to take that best practice and spread it. And that's what the multi-academy trust model, the academies programme, does. And we want to turbocharge that over the next 6 years, because over the next 6 years, we want there to be no underperforming schools. Now, imagine a school system where parents aren't saying, well, I don't want to go to that school in so-and-so street because everybody knows it's a weak school. No, we can't have that in our school system because some children have to go to those schools. So we want every single school to be as good as the one school that every parent wants to send their children to, and this is how you deliver that.
Yeah, the reality is this will distract a lot of energy that should be focused on the front line onto other things. And the chief executive of EACT, one of the largest chains, has said that there's less autonomy in a multi-academy trust than a school on its own. So there are contradictions all over the place on this, and really the government does need to listen to this wide coalition of people who know what they're talking about, who are saying, hold on a minute, why should good and outstanding schools be forced to
John, want to come in briefly there?
Just on where this is headed, we don't know how they're going to get to where they end up, but one of George Osborne, the Chancellor's, guiding principles of politics is you need to be able to add up. And when you add up the number of Conservative rebels at the moment and take away a few for persuasion and people changing their mind, the government can't get this plan through as it is. There'll have to be some kind of further movement. And that's before you get to the House of Lords, where there are plenty and to spare of peers who will just stop the way it's going.
OK, Nick, I mean, can we just sort of accept that as that's a statement of fact, pretty much, it seems to me, that, you're not going to get the plan in its present shape is not going anywhere.
Well, we've been engaged in very radical education reform for the last 5 years. We've brought in a new approach to teaching reading. We've brought in new curricula in the primary schools. We've reformed the GCSEs and A-levels. Nothing we've done has been uncontroversial. Every step of the way, we've had the vested interests criticising what we've been doing. But the consequence of what we've been doing is we have 120,000 six-year-olds today reading more effectively than they would otherwise have been doing had we not engaged in that reform. So this is another stage of reform. Of course, it's controversial, but we press on, we explain, and we will deliver a much better education system, as we have been doing over the last 5 years, because we're prepared to take on the critics, to make our case, and to ensure we have an education system that ensures our young people...
It seems to me that the sums don't add up in terms of evidence for this enforced academisation programme. Neither do the sums add up, actually, in terms of his votes in the House of Commons to get it through.
Right, yeah, that's the last point.
This is classic Nick Gibbs spin. I mean, he can't lose, can he? Because whenever Nick finds there is support from the teaching profession, he cites it in his favour. He's on the right track. When he's there against it and they howl in protest, and there are no head teachers out there demanding greater autonomy at the moment that I can identify, he then takes this as an indication that, he's on the right track, but he's fighting against the vested interests. So there's no way Nick can ever be proved wrong in any context. Evidence is irrelevant to this argument. It's ideology that's driving it.
Well, there you are, Nick. You're always right.
Can I just make this... Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. Can I just point out that 2/3 of schools that are already academies did so voluntarily. So you're saying that 2/3 of head teachers who've opted for it are wrong. They are enjoying their autonomy, and there are lots of head teachers you can talk to who say, the best decision our school ever made to become an academy, all the autonomy and freedoms that come with that.
But if they choose that, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We're not
going to get
But you're saying they're all wrong.
Which is in chaos on its education policies. I mean, we had the Key Stage 1 test fiasco this week. We've had the baseline tests withdrawn. We've got A-level exams in languages due to be taught in September, still not agreed. You know, focus on the real issues. Get the things that you haven't got right, rather than messing around and causing more problems for school and college leaders, a job which I've done, which I know distracts you from the main issues if you're having to manage all this nonsense.
Yeah.
There's a specification in all the subjects now at A-level and GCSE that have been accredited by Ofqual. It has been a long process, but we've refused to compromise on standards. That's why Ofqual has taken to task some of the exam boards who have not produced high enough quality, but we're now in a position where there's at least one subject. There's at least one specification in every subject, and in many of the subjects, more than half the specifications are approved.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Nick Gibb, and thank you to Nick Dakin and John Pugh and Jonathan Arnott as well. I won't say we've resolved the matter, but at least we've explored its nuances. And thank you, John, as well, John Pienaar. John will be back with me to introduce you to Prime Minister's questions a little later. 25 minutes now before 12.